Well, good morning, everyone. I'm James Clinch, the Assistant City Manager. I'm joined by our Fire Chief, Chief Giddens, and we're actually very excited to be up here giving this presentation on 2 hurricanes and not 3, because last week there was a moment where we thought we may actually have to add Sarah to this presentation, which is already at 68 slides. So fortunately, I think we're safely toward the end of season here, and this will be a timely and important recap on what was a the most significant impact we've experienced as a community to date from 2 back-to-back storm events. So to start with, I will apologize in advance for the length of the presentation. There's a lot of information here, and I think that stems from the fact that it's 2 storm events and a lot of questions. I mean, we've heard so much dialogue from the community. We really wanted to take the time to share kind of the data and the real evidence of kind of what happened, why, and where we go from here. So that's our goal here today. So we're going to be kind of sticking to the facts and kind of keeping opinions out of it. And we would welcome at the end any questions you have. We have our directors available as well. So certainly open for any dialogue toward the end of the presentation. And the last point I want to make before we dive in, while we're going to cover a lot of ground and share a lot of information, we are completely of the mindset that every storm brings new opportunities and new ways of doing things. So while it may sound like we kind of have a handle on everything that happened, which we do, we also are very ready to work with our citizen board and work towards potential improvements for the next storm, because that is always the goal, to improve our response and preparedness for the next time. So with that, we'll dive in. The agenda today, as I said, we're going to go through 2 hurricanes, Hurricane Helene and Hurricane Milton, kind of what happened here in Venice. We're going to talk a little bit in detail about storm surge and how those impacts looked here for us locally. We're going to talk about our damage assessments here in Venice, what we sustained in terms of damages. We're going to talk about debris collection and, of course, building permitting from the recovery standpoint. And finally, we're going to go through that after-action review process and how that's going to look moving forward. So with that, I'll pass it off to Chief to talk a little bit about what happened.
Thank you, James. For the record, Frank Giddens, Fire Chief, also the Emergency Manager during declared disasters. So again, with Hurricane Helene, and you'll find that right afterwards we had Hurricane Milton. So just going into the beginning of Hurricane Helene happened on Thursday, September 26th, and you see the landfall was a Cat 4 in the Big Bend area. The devastation carried on through Tennessee, Georgia, and through North Carolina. And you'll find this is an alarming number, over 230 deaths. What we're fortunate enough is a lot of our plans, the emergency management plan, revolves around life safety, incident stabilization, and property conservation. The key to remember throughout the entire thing is 0 deaths, fatalities, no injuries for the city of Venice and our employees and our families in and around the area. So that's the key that we want to continue to focus on. So our emergency management plan does involve these key things. And this is where, again, us coming out with 0 fatalities and death is just a phenomenal thing. And this is as with everything, this is one of the costliest storms in U.S. history. So $200 to $250 billion. And we'll get into that a little bit further as we go on with even just debris collection. The Hurricane Helene, again, with Venice area impacts, we had a level A evacuation, and again, we'll talk further into that. But these are key things that help us prepare as a city. The level A evacuation was announced with Helene, and a lot of this was due to the storm surge impacts that began at 7 a.m. on September 26th. What we found is we got very little rain, 1 to 2 inches, wind gusts up around 65 miles an hour. But this year, particularly, was the storm surge. And what we got a glimpse of is what can 6 feet of storm surge do on our coastline. And that was key. These are lessons learned that as we move forward, and we're just starting to see a revolving, we used to really focus on wind, but just here recently, the storm surge has really impacted us. So we want to, and we'll talk more about that. But our next slide, we have, again, let's see here where we're at. again, over 50 high water rescues performed. Part of the storm details is the response area. We literally had 50 high water rescues performed. A lot of that took place as the storm surge passes through and we start getting that. What we're really just trying to push for our residents is just to really focus on when these evacuation orders are given, please adhere to these orders. And the reason being is with those high water rescues, a lot of that is coming, you know, in just really just unsafe areas or unsafe environments. We have power outages, we have debris, and now we're putting our crews in that, you know, in that environment, which we're happy to do. We'll do it every single time. But when we can really get that word out there to evacuate, that is information that we want our residents to pay attention to. Again, you know, no injuries, no deaths locally, so that's just a great thing, and that just really just shows that our emergency management plan does work. Storm impacts, again, Friday, September 27th. High water rescues continued. This is a great picture. When they say, you know, pictures are worth 1,000 words. If you really just take the time to look at that, the amount of water that is now coming out of the city. So, you know, for Public Works to be able to get this and utilities to open these outfalls and get this water residing as fast as possible is really remarkable. Contractor secured to open up, again, Flamingo Ditch. Coastal flooding fully receded by Friday afternoon. That's also another remarkable benchmark. To deal with the impacts of storm surge and to be able to get that water to freely move out. And you remember this too, we're having to battle not just the storm surge, but the high tides and our outfalls. So, you know, we're working frantically to figure out if we can get, you know, Mother Nature and God on Teams meetings to kind of give us an idea of when this is going to happen again. But, you know, keep in mind when that storm surge is equal to our outfalls and then some, you know, it's a challenge for Public Works and utilities, and they do a remarkable job of getting this water to reside as fast as they can.
Mm-hmm. Take it over here. Mm-hmm. So going back then for Helene, kind of to what actually happened, you know, Helene was a little bit of a one-dimensional storm in terms of the damages to the city. Because the winds were actually fairly low and it didn't rain a whole lot, the damage was focused really to these storm surge areas. And as the chief said, we were very fortunate that the winds stayed under the 45 mile an hour sustained level, or we wouldn't have been able to respond to those 50 requests for rescue, which is very important for folks to remember for the next time. Primarily storm surge from Helene, and it was a pretty accurate forecast. NOAA forecast 4 to 7 foot of surge. We ended up with just under 6 foot per the gauges. However, the flood levels in some of these coastal areas got over 10 feet, which we're going to talk about in a little more detail because that's tough to understand. 6 foot of surge, but my house is at 10 and I had water in my house. How does that work? So we'll talk about that in a little more detail. Here's some gauge data just to let everyone know. I mean, we've got some really good USGS gauges here locally that we're able to monitor in pretty much real time to tell what these surges are doing. This one's right at Crow's Nest, and you can see during Helene, it got up to 5.86 feet. So that was the surge right there inside the inlet. And you can see that it was over 3 feet right early in the morning. So that surge started early, lasted for a long time with Helene. It was a very large storm and slow moving. And then further up, Curry Creek, this is closer to the Venice Bay Mobile Home Park and Harbor Lights, was right around 5.6 feet. That peak storm surge. So after Helene, about a week after the storm, we were really doing pretty well as a city in terms of recovery. I mean, a lot of impacts, a lot of people who were struggling and putting things back together, but we were doing as good as you could a week after storm. We completed our damage assessment. We pretty well knew the damaged areas. We had done a debris assessment, which takes some time to figure out how much debris there is and where is it. We'd activated our debris contractor. They were actively sending resources as available, which was a challenge given the widespread impacts from this large storm. The city had started cleanup and repairs ourselves that week afterwards. And again, moving in that recovery direction. We actually scheduled a recovery meeting at the community center, mainly because it was a little early to schedule it, but there was so much concern from the community, we really wanted to answer those questions. And then Tropical Depression 14 popped up. Saturday, October 5th, 9 days after Hurricane Helene impacted our community. What we were met with was a back-to-back threat, which we've had on a much smaller scale. We've never experienced on a scale to this magnitude. And what that means from an emergency standpoint for us is we've got to now stop storm recovery, switch from recovery focus back into storm preparation. As a small local government, we really can't do both. We can't work on recovery and still get ready to have a major impact from a storm. So that's exactly what we had to do, which is difficult because our resources are already stretched thin, just a little bit over a week after the storm impacted. And our employees, a lot of which had worked for 2 weeks straight with no days off. But you do what you have to do, and we had to get ready for this next event, which ended up being more severe than Helene. So, Chief, I'll let you kind of take over here with Hurricane Milton. This is starting on Monday, October 7th.
And just to kind of just backtrack just a little bit, when we get into the recovery process, even with Helene, that's not something that just happens overnight. So, for instance, with Hurricane Ian, you had Lee County. It took, and even Northport, it takes a year just to get that recovery phase complete. You're working with FEMA, you're working with contractors. Competing with outside resources can also be proven a difficult task when you have Helene going into Asheville and destroying and demolishing, their area. A lot of contractors will have to move to that area. So we're still competing for, certain resources that we need to help us complete the recovery phase. So with Helene, we're still in that recovery phase, and then, here comes Milton. So whether if you follow sports or if you're at it, Mike Tyson had a great quote that said, everybody's got a plan until you get punched in the face. So we got punched in the face with Helene, and then here comes Milton. So what is beautiful about that is the plan that we had in place shows that it works. We're still able to keep doing our recovery phases with Helene while we're now preparing for Hurricane Milton. So we've gone through Ian, we've had Milton, we've had Helene. For God's sakes, we had a whale wash up on our shore. So all this shows that our emergency management plan, it is efficient and it's in place for a reason. So this is, again, whenever you see these kind of slides, it's one thing, but when you see that our directors, our field workers, they're continually doing this all the while they're hoping that their house is still intact. It really just, it hits home, and it really just shows the amount of work that your city employees are really doing for you. So I'm proud of them for what they do. So sorry to get off track a little bit, but now here we are, 9 days later, you have Hurricane Milton. So now here we go for preparing for what literally looks like almost the exact same storm that's coming for us. So we're now in storm preparation. And the next bullet point, we're going to look at now what is supposed to be a Cat 5, 175 mile an hour plus winds. This information now is what we're going off of. These are the subject matter experts. We have to prepare for worst case scenario. So priority one is let's get the city ready for yet another event, and here we go. So your EOC, it's already activated. We just ramped it back up again. So next slide. Tuesday, October 8th. That looks like, we're now looking for, again, this is starting to narrow that cone, just like this is nothing new for everyone. We go through this every time. You see the cone of uncertainty is starting to focus in more on what looks like to be a direct hit for the city of Venice. This was beautiful for us. Public safety, public works, the city of Venice in general, the citizens really started paying attention a little bit more to evacuation communication. So we asked for what looks like we're going to evacuate definitely A, B, and it even gotten to C this round.
And I'll just add to that, Chief. I mean, one of the things about Milton that's important to note is it wasn't just like any other storm. This map of the forecasted impacts to Florida, I've never seen a warning map like that where the entire state from the East Coast to the West Coast is under hurricane warning. And what happens when you have a forecast like that is people kind of go into full panic mode, our residents do. And our job is to stay level-headed, help them to prepare, share information. But we really do have to switch fully into just getting the city ready. We're running a sandbag station at this point that gave away over 20,000 sandbags to county and city residents. We had to put the city under full lockdown because now we're expecting 12 foot of surge and winds. So everything that we had started to get ready for recovery has to go back, into a secure facility. And ended up leading to the next slide here. With the surge, we had to evacuate levels A through C, which again, never has happened in my recollection of living in the city here. We've done A, I think we've done B in the past, but fully level C for a surge forecast of 10 to 15 feet, never happened before, but we had great compliance from our residents at this point. On our side, we had to fully evacuate Fire Station 52, fully evacuate our water plant, which is in evacuation level A, and we had to do, eventually, we waited as long as possible, but a full shutdown of our potable water system. And one thing that we do at the EOCs is we monitor the surge models. So in addition to the NOAA forecast, we have access to some hydrologic surge models that tell us what should happen. On Tuesday, before Milton, all the models were in agreement, 10 to 15 foot of surge, which is unbelievable. And if you look at this map here, Venice is right in the center of it. I remember the University of Florida showed up with a surge gauge and wind gauge that they mounted on Venice Beach, which come to find out that's worse than Jim Cantori showing up at your city because they want to be at the peak location to take these readings. And just to put that in perspective, what 15 foot of surge means, 6 foot of surge we just saw from Helene, and it's bad. It's very bad. It breached the dune, got into a lot of structures and homes. But 6 foot of surge means you get some water in your home. 12 feet of surge is what Fort Myers Beach saw during Ian. And 12 feet of surge means your home is coming off the foundation. The homes are gone at that point. And that was the forecast, unfortunately, for Milton. We had landfall on Wednesday, October 9th at 8:30 p.m. And it was projected to be a Category 3 at landfall. But something quite miraculous happened right at the last minute as it was coming ashore. And I was up at the county EOC, and there was a moment I'm like, is the radar broken that we're using here? What is going on? It was amazing. It turned into basically half of a hurricane. And what had happened is some dry air from a cold front had got sucked into the storm and kind of broke up that southern quadrant. And it was just fortuitous, miraculous, that we were able to lessen the impacts significantly compared to what was forecasted. The other incredible thing worth noting is we had 126 tornado warnings on October 9th, the most tornado warnings ever issued in Florida in one day. And they were all around us, yet none in the city, thankfully. 18.8 inches of rain was recorded in St. Petersburg, which is incredible, within 24 hours. We had less than 2 inches here in Venice. And there's Venice kind of right in the clear. It was actually kind of eerie that it wasn't raining, even though we were getting these horrible conditions. Very little rainfall, as I said. The actual winds were basically under 100 miles an hour, right around Category 1 levels, which was less than expected. We did get a little bit over 100 at the beach directly, but inland it was 80s to 90s. And then our actual surge was reduced to between 6 and 7 feet. Still very significant surge, but about half of what was forecasted. Worth noting, the damages from Milton clearly worse even than Helene because we had the surge and the wind. And there's Venice there below all the rain. So just to show you some gauge data again, this is the Crow's Nest gauge, and this is Hatchet Creek gauge, which is closer to the mobile home parks. And you can see it actually got higher than Helene, up around 6.28 feet, and the same 10 to 11 feet in some of the coastal areas. This is actually the UF wind gauge that they set up. Kind of interesting, if you see the dip there, that's when the eye actually moved over Venice, so the winds dropped for a little period of time, and then we got the backside of the storm, they ramped back up. You can see some of the gusts and that's the red line, got over 100 at Venice Beach, and inland, like I said, a little bit less than that. This is actually the damage map from Helene, but I wanted to kind of put it up here just to point out it was basically, from a storm surge perspective, the same locations that got damaged from Helene, got damaged again, got flooded again from Milton. But with Milton, we had the additional damage of wind, widespread power loss, and communication loss across the city. Wind, obviously, is going to affect our mobile home communities. They're more susceptible to the wind, and they were impacted pretty severely. So we're going to talk a little bit, forgive me for getting a little engineering on you here, but we're going to talk a little bit about storm surge because I think it's just so important for the public to kind of understand it. And again, it's something I haven't experienced to this level before. So there's a lot that can be learned from it, and a lot that we can apply to the future to rebuild our resiliency as a city. So 6 foot of surge for both events, slightly higher during Milton. How do we get to 10 feet? How do we get to 10 foot plus? So this is a cross section of the beach. Okay, so you got the Gulf of Mexico on the left. We've got the dune, the beach on the right, and the structures back behind there. Normally the water level is down low. Everybody's happy. Everybody's enjoying the beach. And this is our dune, which is significantly higher, right? Our dune is our greatest protection. It's a giant seawall that we're fortunate to have partnered with the Army Corps since the 90s to rebuild and renourish. And it's up at a healthy 8.4 feet, which is higher than our neighbors. It's a very great resiliency factor there. Then you add the surge in. And a 6 foot surge for static water is not a big deal. We saw during Debbie this year and Idalia last year surge of about 3 to 4 feet. And we really didn't have any issues. I mean, we had a little bit of minor flooding in the streets, but no structures damaged during those storms because the dune held. That 8.4 dune did its job, held back the surge. The problem with a 6 foot surge with onshore heavy hurricane winds onshore are these breaking ocean waves. And that's the difference that helps you understand how 6 foot turns into greater levels. The breaking ocean waves actually sit on top of the surge. So you take your 6 foot of surge, then you add the 10, 15, 20 foot breaking waves on top of that surge. And then you get what's called wave run-up. And so that's when the waves actually come up over the dune and they start to fill in the backside of the dune. And that's your storm surge event that we experienced twice. And you can call that a dune breach, where the dune actually is overtopped by the surge. To give you an idea of what that looks like inland, this is a cross section of most of our inland areas have fairly good elevation. We are really lucky. There's a reason why the Brotherhood of Locomotive Engineers chose Venice, because it's at a very high elevation for the most part. With the higher elevation inland areas, the surge comes in and it essentially stops. It hits that higher elevation, it stops, and then it recedes as the storm passes. A problem in the areas that flooded that we experienced are the areas that are at a lower elevation. So coastal areas at a lower elevation, unfortunately, acts like a bowl when that surge comes in. So many of the areas, in fact, all of the areas that flooded are actually lower than the beach berm. So when that surge comes in for these areas, it actually fills in that low area as a bowl, as kind of a bowl effect, and causes flooding that's even higher than 6 feet. And that's what we saw widespread throughout both of these storms. I'm going to show you a couple of videos just to kind of help demonstrate what this looked like. These videos are all from Helene. When I was here and with our public works director, we were able to get out kind of right before the surge, kind of right when the surge started. It became a little unsafe to be out any longer than that, but we were able to catch the beginning of the surge. So this is down at the end of Tarpon Center Drive at South Jetty. You can see the surge basically just flowing in directly over the dune. This is at Flamingo Ditch at 4:30 p.m. Before Helene. And one thing you'll notice with Flamingo Ditch is there was a healthy dune in front of the ditch. And this was a point of a lot of contention with some of our residents. Why don't we dig the ditch out? And it's important to remember the dune in front of Flamingo Ditch acts just like the dune the rest of the beach. It is a seawall. It's a protection device that helps to keep the surge out. So if you dig it out, you're actually going to let the surge in faster. So there was a good, healthy dune in front of Flamingo, which would have protected up to a certain point, but we exceeded that, clearly. And as we're standing out there taking this picture, this was the first moment we saw the dune get breached right near Flamingo Ditch. This is what that looks like. So pretty dramatic. That's the Gulf coming over the dune. And when we saw this, we knew it was going to be some widespread impacts because our dune is the same elevation for all 3 miles. So if it's breaching in one spot, it's breaching everywhere. And then it was flowing into this lower lying area like we talked about. And we saw that anywhere it was lower. So this was Venice Beach, which is at a low elevation, completely flooded. This is the fishing pier, North Brohard Beach area, lower elevation. This one was sent to us by one of our residents, but this is down by Casperson's and the golf course. Pretty dramatic seeing that water come in there. So again, the surge flooding is something we haven't seen before, but it's something that residents need to be very aware of because, frankly, once that dune is breached, there's no stopping that water. The only thing you can do is get to higher ground and have a higher elevation. So the questions about what happened that came out after both of these events are actually fairly straightforward, which is we saw surge flooding based on 2 factors. If it was a coastal area with a lower elevation, it had flooding. And that was widespread with all of our neighbors as well. The same issues that Siesta Key and Minnesota Key experienced, we did as well. Coastal with a lower elevation. And why is this so important? Well, through the building recovery process, these questions really matter to homeowners because they're making really hard decisions financially about what they're going to do with their properties. So it's important that they know what that risk level is and what that may mean in the future for their properties. I'll say for sure this is not a once-in-a-lifetime event. I hope back-to-back is once in a lifetime, but a surge of 6 feet is actually like a 25 to 50-year storm, which unfortunately is not as infrequent as one would hope. I think we've gotten very lucky over the years in Venice to have not experienced this. But unfortunately, it is something we will likely see again. Elevation is the best protection. So if you're a homeowner thinking about the best way to make your property more resilient, there is no better way than elevation. The properties that were elevated did much better. And the last example, which I think tells the story really, really well, this is a flood map that shows elevation 10. So everything in blue was essentially flooded from Hurricane Helene and Hurricane Milton. To the north, you've got Flamingo Ditch outfall, where the homes and the roads are around elevations between 4 and 9 feet. And to the south, you have Deertown Gully outfall, where the homes and the roads are higher. They're at around elevation 12 to 15 feet. The important thing is these outfalls are exactly the same. They're both channels that empty through the beach to the Gulf of Mexico. Identical. They went through identical surges. They both experienced the same surges from these storms. Deertown Gully, hardly any, little to no flooding. Flamingo Ditch, major, major flooding. The difference was elevation. And that's what we saw on Tarpon Center. That's what we saw with Harbor Lights and with Venice Bay. Those lower elevations really, really suffered from these events. Moving on to some other kind of damages to talk about was the sand. Unbelievable the amount of sand that was brought in from these surge events. Something we've never experienced before and brought some new challenges. We had to come up with a sand management policy, which we had to share with all of our coastal residents on how to manage the sand. And I really just want to kind of thank and compliment our coastal communities and condominiums and HOAs. They did a phenomenal job with coming in and working with the city on what they can and can't do and taking control of their recovery. This is a private contractor putting sand back onto the beach that's clean, which is what we encourage folks to do. The city took care of all the streets and the beaches and the parking lots, but all of these private properties did it themselves. They brought in contractors and they recovered, and they're in the process of recovering, but they restored the sand back to the beach where they could. Shifting over now into what the city damages were. This is our poor Humphreys Park, South Jetty, which got really just, hammered by Helene and then even larger during Milton. We could talk a long time about the future of this park. Well, I won't go into it today, but we are working closely with the Army Corps on what that future project is going to look like. Our damages here for the city, these are just estimates right now. They're a couple weeks old, but these are estimates for both Helene and Milton. About $7 million for Helene and a little over $12.5 million for Milton. You'll notice for Helene, the largest monetary damage was from South Jetty, Humphreys Park, and from Milton, it's the debris number of close to $6.5 million. Our fishing pier got damaged from both storms. And this is not the best picture, but next time you're on the pier, think about the deck of that pier is about 20 feet above the water level. So those waves were hitting the railing of this pier, which was probably 25 feet in the air. Pretty incredible to think about the size of those waves. Our airport, really almost undamaged from Helene, very, very minimal damage, but Milton had the major wind issues and they had a lot of damage to their T-hangars and personal aircrafts. Our utilities infrastructure was damaged from both storms. We have lift stations and water lines in these flooded areas that were offline, had to be restored. Our sports parks took quite a bit of damage, very vulnerable because of the shade structures and fencing. And then obviously citywide wind damage, signs, light poles. We lost 25 light poles, hundreds of street signs. A lot of work. I guess this is probably the best time to just say thank you to our staff. They've done a phenomenal job in restoring the city as quickly as humanly possible. It looks really pretty good out there. I mean, a whole lot better than we did a month ago, and it's getting better every day thanks to their efforts. So the good news now is really, I think most parks are open. There may be just a couple that they're still working on. All of our beaches are open. All of our roadways are open. I saw some Christmas lights going up this morning. That's something to be thankful for. Our lift stations and our wells are all functional. Athletic fields are partially open. T-hangars partially open. A lot of work to be done there. We had 29 of our city facilities that were damaged. 8 are what's called turnkey, which means they met the insurance deductible and they're gonna have to do larger scale projects. But our city staff are fully focused on recovery and making sure the city's safe, beautiful, ready for the holidays and the tourist season. All right, we're making good progress here. But two more important topics for me, and then I'll pass it off to the chief. Talking about debris. So we've said before, hurricane debris typically takes around 90 days. Hurricane Ian was 91 days of collection. Irma back in 2017 was actually even longer than that. Debris collection had started after Helene, but had to be paused due to the impending impact of Milton. After Milton, the city took some steps to ensure we got the resources that we needed. There were some resource issues after Helene. We secured a new vendor. We switched our vendor after Helene to Crowder Golf, and we also did an emergency rate increase to make sure that the resources we got would stay here and not get sucked away to another community that was paying more. Today, we're at 93,800 cubic yards of debris collected, significant number, 28.7 Olympic swimming pools, or half a Titanic, or so Brianne Lorenz tells me. That's 33 days of debris collection, and I'm happy to report we're almost done. And this is all thanks to our Public Works Department. Ashley Castle, who heads up our debris collection, is diligent. This is a 7-day-a-week operation, sunrise to sunset every day, and they've made incredible progress. We are doing very well. We are ahead of most of our neighboring communities thanks to their efforts. And this is why, debris collection is not something that we do on this scale locally. Now, it may be something we do more of in the future. Certainly, that's a conversation to be had. But currently, in the way every other community in our region does it, is we bring in under contract these contract haulers. They come in with specialized rigs that can hold significant amount of debris, and they are highly trained and licensed to do this type of work. And they do it very well and very quickly. We also set up what's called a debris management site. This is something that helps to expedite debris collection so that they can make more trips during the day instead of going straight to the landfill. It's also more cost effective because they can break everything down into a smaller volume. Debris is the most expensive part of recovery. It's going to be, like I said, about $6.5 million for Milton. To put that in perspective, for Hurricane Ian, Northport spent almost $80 million on debris collection. It can be significant. It's highly specialized work. It's not something that we do or have staff that are trained to do. The good news, it typically will be reimbursed if and only if we comply with those FEMA guidelines. And that's tough. There's a lot of different needs. There's a lot of steps and hoops and red tape. But if we follow it, this is a great insurance policy for our tax dollars to get this significant money paid back to us. That said, reimbursement can take many years, typically 2 years to get that money reimbursed. So shifting now to the building department, and I'll go through this fairly quickly, but I did want to kind of point out, we've learned a lot on the building side because we've never had to deal with the 50% rule due to widespread flooding. And building staff have done a phenomenal job working through this. It starts with damage assessment, which means when the storm hits, the building staff stop what they're doing. Normal inspections get put on hold, normal permit processing gets put on hold, and all of their staff go out in the field and they see what was damaged and how badly. And it takes at least a week depending on what those damages are. When they're done with that, they shift into permitting mode, which is thankfully where we are now. But we're responsible for ensuring compliance with the federal and the local floodplain regulations, that 50% rule. It applies to all the damaged structures, and all of these structures are inspected, and today they've all been delivered letters that just say, we visited, we've assessed your structure, we know there's damage, here's the process, come see us, and we'll work through the process with you. There will come a point in the future where there'll be a second round of letters coming out in relation to substantial damage, which we'll talk about next. Substantial damage is the 50% rule definition, where if 50% of the structure is damaged and cannot be restored under that 50% threshold, then it's going to have to be brought into compliance with the flood zone ordinances. It's a difficult rule, very, very difficult rule. It's not a new rule, it's something that happens during blue sky conditions, but what we've seen from these storms is that now it's widespread. So whereas normally it's just a few properties that are doing renovation work dealing with the 50% rule, now we've got hundreds of properties at the same time working through this process. So we appreciate their patience is probably the best thing to say about that. It is a slow process, it is cumbersome, but it's very, very important to our community that we do it in a consistent and fair manner. It does apply to all buildings in the flood hazard area, regardless of whether they carry insurance or not. It also applies to city buildings. So city properties on the beach, when we renovate them, we've got to go through the 50% rule just like anybody else. All repairs must be accounted for at the same time. And this one has caused a lot of heartache, unfortunately, because it's tough. You want to just get your air conditioner working. You want to just get this thing repaired. The challenge is for our building department, they have to show they're under this threshold. So it has to be done as a package to ensure compliance. And as I said, if the repairs can't be performed within that 50% threshold, the structure will have to be brought into code compliance. And for the first time, we have several structures that this is going to apply to. Maybe not as many as we thought initially, but certainly a lot on the mobile home side, and several on the single family side in the Golden Beach area where this will apply. So how are we dealing with this? Well, our building department staff are meeting regularly and frequently with residents one-on-one. They're also holding larger meetings with HOAs and associations to talk about these policies and the process. They're every day that I walk through the lobby of the building department, Derek, Paul, or Bill are out there talking to somebody and helping them through the process. And that's our role in this process. Because every situation is different and a little bit tricky. There's no one size fits all. Single family, condominiums, and mobile homes are all a little bit different. So they're working with them one-on-one. And as I said, they're helping people through the process. Why is it so important? At the end of the day, the reason compliance with these rules are so important is our participation in the National Flood Insurance Program depends on it. Depends on our ability to say we have ensured compliance with these rules. The NFIP is the greatest protection the city offers its residents. And we get this question a lot throughout our meetings is what's the city doing for us? How are you making us more resilient? How are you helping us for the next time? Well, the city spends a lot of time, energy, and resources on being sure we're in compliance with this program. And this program offers a lot of benefits to our community. Number one, financial recovery. We don't do financial recovery as a local government. That's not something that we do. But there's a lot of people that do financial recovery, FEMA being one of them and the NFIP being another. This ensures structures and contents at discounted rates. In fact, because of our good work in the CRS program, our rates are going to be discounted 25% in this coming April. The flood insurance is required for all FDIC mortgages, so a pretty big deal that our residents have access to reasonable flood insurance. Increased cost of compliance coverage, this actually will help with raising structures. So if you had flood insurance and you're not going to make the 50% rule, you'll have access to some funding to help you raise your structure or rebuild. It's required participation for certain federal grants and assistance. And our role then in having providing this access is we have to be sure those rules are enforced consistently and fairly. Thank you for bearing with me. That's it for the building permitting side of things. Our final topic is the chief's going to talk about our after-action review process. Chief?
So just a few more slides, and again, apologize for the length of the presentation, but it actually gives you an idea of what takes place every single time that we go through a storm. This is 10 days compiled into one presentation. Once we get to a point where we're now over, we're done with the storm, is complete, we do what's called an after-action review. That's your AAR. What this does is, the purpose of it really is to provide essential feedback from different stakeholders, and what it does is it helps us to strengthen our city's emergency management plan. It also helps us to strengthen each department's COOP plan, or their continuity of operations plan. So those are the internal plans. What this information does is it helps us to gather what is expected to occur. In this case, a Cat 5 hurricane. What really happened? Okay, we ended up with a Cat 2 with a storm surge of this, as opposed to what was expected. What went wrong and why? Not necessarily that it has to be what went wrong, but what happened, why did it happen, how did we react, and how can we build on it? What went well and why? So those are just some of the things that just starts the after-action report. What this does, and you'll find some of these slides are redundant because the AAR process is a redundant process. So data collection analysis. And we've done this as a city. We just did it with our department directors. After the storm has passed, and there's not another one on the horizon, we get together at the EOC with all the department directors, and we basically now are taking this information and we're compiling it to form what is our lessons learned. What are we going to be doing next? So on November 1st, we did our first one. That survey was done. It allows us again to collect data from the subject matter experts, which are your your public works, your utilities, your IT, things of that nature, public, fire and safety, police department, I'm sorry. But it allows us to continue to strengthen and develop our future plans, our operations, our logistics, and our financial backgrounds. So what we find is it helps to identify a lot of common concerns and issues through a lot of the storms. Our next thing is we're now developing our observations. That's our next step. It's, again, we specifically go over the topic. What specific assertions can we do? Those injects or actions that we can now implement to strengthen our overall plans. And again, this tells us, again, what actually happened, what was the effect of it, and again, what are our future recommendations and lessons learned. After we're done with that, we then we gather information from different stakeholders, and then now we reconvene. And again, we're taking away what are our major takeaways, our lessons learned, and what are our recommended actions. You'll notice that our city's KEMP plan, it's revised every 2 years based on a lot of this information that we gather. I'll try to move as quickly as possible. We just have a few more. The combination, again, this is something that we're always open to. We're going to coordinate and bring in an outside stakeholder and a citizens advisory board. Phenomenal idea. This is going to be a good opportunity, one, to educate our citizens on what we do as a city, and it helps us to get some feedback from certain stakeholders who are within the city. We already have things in place too. Venetian Golf and River Club, they have what's called a hurricane readiness team that we work with them every year. There's several different communities. Country Club Estates is another one that is a phenomenal group. Bay Indies. All these groups, they have what's called internal hurricane readiness teams. We work with them. This will also help us to strengthen our overall needs of what do we need to do for our citizens. We put together our Hurricane Expo every year. So our planning is really, it starts in April and it just never really stops. So we're doing the right things, but it's something we can definitely build on. And really, conclusion, or our next slide, hurricanes Helene and Milton caused the worst surge events in Venice. This is something that we have not yet had to deal with. We've seen it, and we even saw it with Hurricane Ian with Northport. We're just in that cycle where the storm surge is just really a challenge for us this year. The impacts were significant, but less than predicted. Again, no fatalities, no injuries. When we did our 50 water rescues, not one single deceased victim, and that's phenomenal. That again just shows that what we're doing as a city, it's working, and our residents, we're figuring it out as we go. The city is actively assisting residents through the recovery process. This is something that, again, when you have companies coming down from all over the country to assist with getting our residents, back on their feet, is no different than what the city of Venice does every single year. So it's just great to see this process work. Our last one, hurricanes, they always come with challenges, disruptions, property damage. Our role as a city, again, is to help prepare you in advance. Are we going to be able to control Mother Nature? Never. But we're going to be able to do everything we can to make sure that our emergency management plan helps to protect us to the best of our ability. We want to make sure that we keep everyone well informed. Our PIOs, they do a great job. It's consistent with the county's message. We want to try to continue to build on that. Communication is always going to be an issue. We just want to make sure that we're getting that information out there early, and that's why we do the Hurricane Expo in April. The information that we're giving gives you several months to prepare and get yourself ready. And we're starting to see, the citizens, they're doing it. They're doing very good at it. We can always build. And again, that's it. Build resiliency for the next time. Conclusions, if you want to take.
Yeah, I mean, that's great. We're going to be meeting with the CAB tomorrow, the chief and I, and we'll be kind of going through the same discussion with them and look forward to working with them on ways to enhance our EM policies moving forward. Because it really comes down to working together, and this is the message that all of our departments are putting out with residents. I mean, we certainly understand the very justified hurt and frustration that comes along with these tragic events, but working together is the quickest way forward. And so that's where we want people to be, and that's where we are as a staff. So thank you for bearing with us through this long presentation, but it was a lot of information, and we'd love to answer any questions that you have at this time.
And before we move on to questions, I'm going to go ahead and break us. We'll come back at 11:35, and then we'll wrap up with some questions for you guys, and then move on to our next presentation.
Thank you, Mayor.
Just like to make sure. All right. Tony, are we okay? Everyone? Hi. Okay. We are back, and we will move on to questions of Assistant City Manager Clinch and Fire Chief Frank Giddens. If any council member has any question, it looks like we had a switch over to planning commissions. Unless Robert Young and Kit McKeon are here asking questions.
Just one moment.
No problem. I'm like, I don't know who to call, but I know that's not them.
You're correct.
There we go. Okay. So council members, if you have a question, just go ahead and hit your request to speak button again if you had already had it, so that way I have you in order. Okay. All right, we'll start with Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Mayor. My first question, I know we'll want to take turns, really is see if there's any impact or effect from the storms on 3 different projects that we already are looking forward to. I could rattle them off all 3, but I'd like you to address each of them if you would. The project for improvements, utility-based, I guess, but seawall as well along Tarpon Center. The contract that we've entered into with a consultant for the Flamingo Ditch, if that has any, if it informs that at all. And then the third one is, with all this sand, is there some benefit from it for this, the next upcoming renourishment that we budgeted for? Seems like it might. Anyway, those 3.
Thank you. Sure. I'll go through each one here. So the Tarpon Center seawall project is moving forward. That is under contract, and will continue to move forward. So really no impacts one way or the other from the storm. I think it may have delayed the start date just a touch, but that one is moving forward, and certainly will help from a resiliency standpoint with the flooding down there on that intersection. Flamingo Ditch is also moving forward. I think that these events certainly help add some real data to that conversation. The engineering firm is very familiar with this type of project and this situation. They're also our beach consultant, so they're very familiar with our beach landscape. So we've had a kickoff meeting with them. We're working on putting a public meeting together to meet with the community to hear their concerns, and that'll be happening in December. So they're moving forward very well, and like I said, if anything, these events just kind of help to give some realistic data to what they're going to be studying. So beneficial in a way to the exercise that they're going to be going through. And then the last question regarding sand, we're still waiting to get the final report back. The dune certainly is higher, but it doesn't necessarily mean you gained sand on the hole, because you may have a higher dune, but you may have lost it on the frontal ends of the dune, if that makes sense. So the overall volume may have just shifted around. So we haven't yet determined whether we really gained sand or not. But again, this helps us with the renourishment project coming up, because it just puts additional pressure on the fact that we need to get this project moving, and it's critical to our future resiliency. That beach project is our #1 resiliency project, and it's still on track to happen next year.
Thank you.
Ms. Farrell?
I'd like to ask questions, clarification on the slide that's titled at the top, Recovery, Building Department, and under bullet number 3. If you can find that slide, it would be helpful.
No problem.
It looks like this. Can you see that from, yeah? I wish I had the slide number.
So there's a few with that title.
Oh, few with that. This one starts out, building department staff must perform damage assessment immediately post-storm. There it is.
There we
Okay.
go.
In that last one, it says all damaged structures inspected. Did you really mean by, all substantially damaged structures inspected?
Great question, and I may phone a friend here if I get off track. Derek, feel free to come down. What the building inspectors do after a storm is they actually do what's called a windshield inspection. So they go out into the community and they look at and photograph every single structure that's damaged. So it is truly every single structure. However, important to note, these are not detailed inspections. They're not going inside the structures. They're not, tearing back drywall and looking at electrical connections. These are just driving by, trying to find water lines, taking photographs of those water lines so they know how high the water got, and doing a general assessment of the damages to say, was this major damage, moderate damage, or minor damage? And they do that by looking at that water line. So it is widespread inspection. It's very important for two reasons. Number one, we put a monetary number to it. So it goes into a software that we use called Crisis Track. And each one of these damaged structures gets a monetary value assigned to it. Those numbers get pushed to the county, then to the state, and then to the federal government. And those numbers actually drive the federal national declaration that opens up FEMA funding to the community. So it's critical that our inspectors get out there very quickly and do this assessment so we can hit those thresholds. And so FEMA can open the significant, millions of dollars worth of funding and assistance that goes out to our community. So that's number one. Number two, it's important that we have a catalog of what structures were damaged so we can be sure that they're properly repaired and permitted and made habitable again throughout the permitting process. So that's kind of number two on the reason why we do that.
Thank you. And then the second part of it, notices delivered to every property affected in the special flood hazard area. Is that notice the one that is called the red tag notice? And if it is, what exactly does the red tag notice say?
So I am gonna call down our building official for this one, just to be sure I stay on track here, because he can speak to the notices that have gone out today and the notices that will be coming in the future, which I believe are the red tag that you're talking about. Thanks, Derek.
So we did two methods of delivery for the notices, the initial notices of the property being damaged. We did a physical mailing of them, and we, with the help of our code enforcement office, delivered those by hand as well. So we did do the first notices like we're required to by the statutes. I don't know what the term you're using is red tag. I don't have a red tag definition, but we will move to substantially damaged structures. So we will issue notices to damaged structures if we deem that they're substantially damaged, yes. But I don't know if that answers your question. I don't have a red, we have not done that yet.
Okay. When you do, what will that notice say?
It will simply say the fair market value of the structure, the expected repair costs, and where they're at in that threshold, either above or below. In order to get that notification, they'll have to be above the 50% threshold. And then we would take them through the steps that we would with any other process about how to establish that threshold. If they want to contend it, we can give them the options on how to move forward, just like we would any other time. This is going to be for the residents that are not actively trying to come into our office, or we haven't been out to theirs to let them know that those 800 or 900 that we sent out initially, we still know that the damage is there. We haven't seen you. We need to have these conversations.
Thank you.
Ms. Frank?
Thank you. I have a few just quick questions. A resident sent a picture to me. It was a regular pickup truck with a connected trailer for debris hauler. Would that be a private debris hauler that some individual homeowner likely hired to pick up their debris? It wouldn't be a City of Venice contracted debris hauler. Is my understanding there correct?
Correct. I will say, some of the other companies that the county is using are using pickup trucks with trailers. So there are some of those units out there that I've heard of.
Okay.
Our hauler, Crowder Golf, is using the double rigs, very large trucks that you've seen around town. I do not believe that they have any of those trailer pickup rigs in process. That being said, there are lots of private companies that are moving debris, and that's totally fine as well. So it may have been either a county unit or a private company.
Perfect. And my second question is the USGS tide data that you shared with us, registered the storm surge. Does that same apparatus also register the wave action?
No,
Okay.
and that's a great question. So the UF gauge that they installed at the beach, which was pretty, if you saw the pictures, it's pretty substantial. They had to drill it, kind of auger it into the beach. Unfortunately, it broke during the storm. The wind reader kept working, but the water level broke. That would have measured your wave height, which would have been great. So to answer your question, that's just static water level, because it's inland, so you're not seeing the wave effect. We did get some high water marks. USGS came out, and you can access those online. A couple locations near, actually Sharky's Restaurant, that they took some watermarks and put them into GIS, and it was right around 11 feet. So those are pretty accurate. We also had our engineering department go out in the Flamingo Ditch area and the other impacted areas, measure watermarks, measure them off the ground, use LiDAR data to estimate that 10 to 11 foot peak that they saw out there.
Great. The after-action review, is that typically a 3-6 year-long process? When will that be made public for those who would like to review it?
I'll let Frank chime in on this one here. Thanks, Derek.
So the AAR, or After Action Report or Review, is not necessarily made public, just for confidentiality, just to protect our emergency management plan. But what we presented today, obviously, is public, and that's something that we're happy to share with and speak to, we've gotten so much data now, even for our Hurricane Expo in April, that will allow us to, converse with the public. And again, this is data that is literally in our backyard. But certain things, obviously, you will be privy to.
I can add to that. The after-action report for Lee County after Hurricane Ian took them 11 months to produce. I don't think ours is going to take that long, but you want to make sure you do it right. So it certainly is going to take some time. I think working with the Citizens Advisory Board is going to add a little bit of time to that process, which is not a bad thing, but just kind of keeping in mind that it's going to depend on how quickly they want to move as well as we can kind of get to that finished product.
Great. And then one more question. There were some emails that City Council was CC'd on, and I just want to make sure I have a solid understanding of what happened. According to your presentation, the city's contractor dug out the Flamingo Ditch after one storm. Did it dig it out both times, or can you explain what the city knows happened relating to digging it out with both storms?
I can. So after Helene, the surges were actually, even though they were similar heights, they were very different surges. So Helene came in slower, stayed longer because it was such a massive, slow-moving storm. So when it came out, there was this huge mound of sand left in front of Flamingo Ditch and our other outfalls. So we actually had to bring in an outside contractor with a massive piece of equipment to dig that out, and they also dug out our other outfalls because there was so much sand that was thrown up there. Milton actually, even though it came in higher, it was much faster because the surge came, and as soon as the storm moved past us, it left. That's why you actually saw damage from what's called the ebb surge, which we saw at Sharky's Restaurant and some other locations where that surge rushed out and actually dug a trench on the way out. So the mound in front of Flamingo after Milton was actually not as big, and I understand some residents went out and dug it out early in the morning, like 2-3 a.m., as soon as the conditions allowed it. So when we first light, the streets were dry after Milton.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Howard?
Thanks, Mayor. Great presentation, a lot of information. So the dunes you talked about at 8.2 or 8.4 feet is what they are currently?
8.4.
8.4. The cross-section was very helpful, by the way, and the videos of the surge and the analogy of the bowl when it crests or breaches the dune. So this is probably a subjective question, but is there any logic to raising the dune higher than 8.2? And I know you said there was some washout of sand on the beach or the Gulf side of that, but is that an answer? I mean, we had some very upset residents at our last council meeting, and I'd be upset too. And, I'm not sure there's ever going to be a 100% fail-safe that this is never, ever going to happen again. I don't think you can reasonably make that statement. But it seems like based on your graphics or that cross-section that maybe raising those dunes slightly higher than 8.4 is, a step in the right direction. Certainly if the water is higher than the outflows, there's not a whole lot you can be able to do about that, right? I mean, unless you get pumps, and maybe that's part of the engineering or the consultant's suggestions. And I don't even know how big a pump would have to be to pump that much water. I can't even get my head wrapped around that. But just curious, is that something that would be considered because some of our beaches in northern Florida, they have pretty substantial dunes up there, and I didn't know if that was something that was even reasonable for our area.
Great question. And so, yes, that is certainly something that our consultants working on the Flamingo Ditch feasibility study are looking at, because that really is, the greatest protection in place for that area, next to just raising everything, which is also something that they're looking at, because elevation is the best answer to these issues. Our dune at 8.4 is significant already. I think most of our, you look at Siesta and Manasota Key, those dunes are down 4, 5, 6 feet. So we're up there. It's going to come down to, what we can do from a permitting standpoint and what the Army Corps is willing to do as well. Without getting too detailed, I can tell you the challenge with the dunes is a lot of them are set back from the erosion control line, which means they're actually on private property. So the ability to raise those is going to be more challenging than what our normal renourishment project is, which is everything kind of in seaward, westward of that erosion control line. So it's a good suggestion. It is something that they'll be looking at from the feasibility standpoint. I think it's going to come down to whether that is permittable through the Army Corps that really manages our renourishment project.
That makes sense. If I was a property owner, I'd be looking for whatever I could protect my property with. And I realize you're talking about now blocking your view of the ocean or whatever, but if you don't have a home, the view doesn't exist anymore. The communication, will that be addressed as well? Because I think our PIO department did an incredible job. I mean, I was glued to this thing like every time it refreshed, I was reading the updates. But once the towers go down or the cell service or internet is gone, there's no way to communicate anymore. And we heard a lot of citizens concern, and rightfully so, about that. So, and maybe this is way out there, Star Wars issue, but I know that, and I'm just using this as an example because they did it in North Carolina with Starlinks, but I know that a lot of the cell companies opened up all their towers, so they fight for market share, but then during a disaster, Verizon and all AT&T and all the big companies open up their towers. So maybe there's something we can do as a city. I don't know what that looks like, but it's a temporary services. I know in big events, AT&T will bring in these portable communications like Starlink so that our staff, our emergency response team, and our residents have a way to communicate. So
on that note, we were able to, we had one or two Starlinks of our own, and we were able to procure 3 of them through our state resources, which was great. We set up 2 at different city facilities. We set up 1 at the Venice Museum, which was available to the public to come park your car, log on, check in with your loved ones, and a lot of people used it. One of our recommendations that came out of our first after action meeting is we need to get some more of those Starlinks ourselves because they were very easy to use and worked great. Another thing to kind of keep in mind is, and I'm getting way out of my knowledge base here, but I understand Apple is working on enabling satellite communication on iPhones in the future. So right now they do it for text messaging. But Roger Navarro tells me that it's going to be coming for voice as well in the future. That'll be a game changer for what we're dealing with here. Because as we've talked about, and we preach this at all of our hurricane expos, the realities of a hurricane is if you get hit, you're going to have loss of communication, loss of power, potentially loss of water. These are all things that need to go into your decision on what your plan's going to be. Because today, those are pretty much guaranteed, you're going to lose those services for a period of time. It seems like these providers are improving and coming up with ways to improve their recovery. I mean, we saw from the power standpoint, Irma, just my own example, Irma, I was out for 2 weeks. Ian, I was out for probably 10 days. And this storm, I was out for, 5 days, which was longer than most people. So every storm, these utility providers are also doing a little bit better. We're not there yet.
Thanks. Thanks, Mayor.
All right, I'll go, and then Mr. Smith, you can go after me. I just want to take this opportunity to make sure that everyone out of the 400 employees we have in the city understands how much, at least I, but I'm sure I can speak for the council in saying we appreciate the efforts. I mean, having gone down our streets, pre and post storm, both storms, and seen, everybody has the choice to stay or go. And our employees stayed. They worked incredibly hard. Just walking around City Hall and seeing how many hours you guys put in. We were circulating some photos of, I think even Mr. LaValle, in his office past 9 o'clock or something like that, just because that shows the dedication every single one of you guys commits to this community. So I just want to make sure that is out there for everyone to hear loud and clear, is that I am incredibly grateful for every single one of you guys, from handing out ditches to making sure that the communication is spot on, the detail, everything behind the scenes that's going on with IT and just all the different departments. I know people don't understand it, and I wish we could show everyone what's going on, and just in a small city of ours, 27,000 people, how much large scale that is in other areas, but how nice the level of service is here because you are a smaller community and you can do so much for so few, versus when resources get spread thin. So I just think that's very important to put out there. Some things that I'm sure you guys are going to do, I just want to make sure that, I just say a few things. Talking to those who may have decided to stay, probably have changed their mind in the future, but making sure that we get some kind of capture of that feedback. Why did you decide to stay? Was it the messaging from the city? What could we have done differently to kind of implore you to leave? Is it transportation services that we could have established with the county or something like that? And I know you guys are going to work on all that kind of stuff, but I am curious to find that out in this after action review that's going to be done publicly. The other big thing that I have, and I think that we'll get past this and then all of a sudden everything kind of goes back to normal, but I want to know from you guys what you need to do the job better the next time. This is now, I've been responding to hurricanes since 2004. Charlie was my first federal deployment, and I've seen a lot of these. And every single storm is different. We can do things differently all the time, and it's never going to be perfect. But I want to know what you guys need as a city so that we can prepare you better to better serve the residents. And I absolutely agree with you. I remember being weeks without power, no air conditioning, water, ice, and MREs was the deal back then. We had food set up in the city within, it was like hours. It was like, well, wait, we already got lights on. What's going on? So, I think that it's incredible, and I think as we move forward and develop and technology and all that kind of stuff, it'll get better for us. But I just want to make sure that you guys have what you need. So a survey of the departments on what they feel they would need from the city, so we can start looking as we go into strategic planning and budgeting and all that kind of stuff. How can we best use our tax dollars to get the best bang for our buck? And again, thank you both so much for taking the time to put this together. I think that this is one of the most difficult pieces. It's not coming here and informing us, it's coming here and informing us so that we can help inform the public and direct them to this presentation so that they can see what you guys did, have done, are doing. I think that's very important.
Thank you, Mayor.
Mr. Smith.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, and I too would congratulate all of our city employees. I wanted to thank the two of you, and I dove right in with some questions at the top, but I meant to thank you for that comprehensive report. your first one to us after the storms, and I look forward to follow-up reports, which I assume will be coming at appropriate times, and thank you for them. I did have just a few other questions, if I could. If I understand correctly, we have 7 manufactured home parks in the city, just the 2 that are in the flood management zone. Because we have a Venice Municipal Mobile Home Park, and I wonder if you could tell us about any impacts there.
You want to take this one?
So, absolutely. So, mobile home parks, we have quite a few within our city limits. The damage sustained, again, is dependent on the severity of the storm. Unfortunately, even when you get a Cat 1 hurricane, a lot of the mobile home parks, we see significant damage along the lines of their lanais, and a lot of this is based too on the year of manufacture of the mobile home. Some of them nowadays are built with 2x4s in the walls and shingles. Some of them that were built back in the, even say the 80s and 90s, unfortunately were not designed to that. So when we get any type of storm, specifically with mobile homes, wind factor is a great impact. This one, with Helene and Milton, we also had to deal with the storm surge. And we do have mobile home parks that, just over our North Bridge, Venice Municipal Mobile Home, they're all closer to the water. So this one, unfortunately, any type of storm, we always see, more severe impacts to mobile home parks.
And specifically, the municipal mobile home park did not have severe flooding because they are on higher ground, but certainly did have wind damage issues that they dealt with and are still dealing with. I know our city manager went out and met with them personally regarding some of the issues. I wasn't at the meeting, but mostly wind damage related issues.
Do you have any idea the number of units there substantially damaged? I know that's not the within that zone.
Yeah, that one would be tough. I mean, for specifics, what I can say with all mobile home parks, and I'd like to actually bring attention specifically, our damage assessment team, led by Mr. Applegate, phenomenal job of getting out and working with, even before the storms. We have a policy, even within the city, our emergency management plan is to get what's called CAM reports, conditions, actions, and needs. This is both prior to the storm, during when we can, and post-storm. And, specifically even last week, we were with Bay Indies. What a phenomenal community. Country Club Estates, can't say enough about them. They understand, and there are some of our residents who are aware of their geographical location and the size of the storm and the impacts that it can bring on. But to give specific numbers, it's difficult. We can try to get.
Yeah, we could get back to you on the specific numbers. One thing I'll point out, though, you said substantial damage.
I know they're not in the FEMA zone.
Yeah, they're not in the flood zone for the most part, which means, even if there was damage, it can be repaired with a building permit going through the
They don't
normal
have that
process.
50/50 rule, but I was just curious how many units in there were damaged, if we knew. Okay.
We'll get back to you with that.
Okay.
Happy to, yeah.
You made some allusion to, we might look at these bigger claw trucks. Is that something we'll look at in the budget process, what those would cost and whether we would want to have one of these bigger units?
I think that's a great conversation to have as part of the after-action process. I think that it's very complex, more than you would think for a claw truck picking up debris, because the operator has to have a special CDL license to operate a dual rig like that. So it's a very specialty kind of an operation. So the big question for us would be, does the benefit warrant the annual ongoing cost of maintaining and keeping the equipment and the staff? But it's absolutely something we should talk about and look into. Another issue which will come up in the after action review is, because Milton caused kind of such a panic and kind of frenzy throughout the community, there was no way to get in the landfill before the storm. So we could have had 100 trucks on the road. We wouldn't have gotten them to the landfill. So there's some other factors I think that we're going to have to really work through to see if there are ways we can improve that response in the future. We should do it, absolutely. But there there's gonna be some limiting factors as well that we have to keep in mind.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate your comments about the Citizen Advisory Board and their role in this process. Of course, that part would be very public, and I appreciate there's some differences between your internal review and that review. And you indicated in an email a bunch of things that have been shared with the Citizen Advisory Board, and I wondered if you'll also be sharing with them all of the public emails that the council and the city manager's office has received, because otherwise those people have to send separate ones to them.
Haven't had that request from them, but certainly can bring it up tomorrow, and happy to, it's all public records. We can share anything and everything with them that would be helpful in their review process. So
Sure.
just have to kind of define what they're looking for. It's a lot of information there.
All right, then one last question from me, if I can. Can you talk about enforcement of non-permitted work? Maybe that's for Mr. Applegate, and I have had some concerns raised about that. So I'd just like to know how we're going about seeing that major work is done only by contractors, or that work isn't beginning before that 50% process. What is the enforcement process?
That's a great question. We'll have Derek come up and fill us in on that. I mean, I'll just start with, it's critical. I sent those letters to you all last week, I believe, a couple weeks ago, about the communities to the south of us that are under potential probation from the NFIP. Very serious, and one of the issues they got in trouble for is not following up and enforcing their building unpermitted work with some of these residents. So it's unfortunate. We're doing our best to make sure everybody follows the rules. You're gonna have a small group that doesn't or chooses not to, and so we're gonna have to follow up with them and get them into the process. So I'll let Derek speak to how that'll work.
So we're working with code enforcement to do that. So like James said earlier, we're trying to balance between going back to our normal jobs on a full-time basis, but still paying special attention to the homes that need the attention in the special flood hazard areas. So our inspectors that we have now are out doing their jobs every day. They always look for work that are going on with or without the benefit of permits, and they talk to the people all the time about how to best come back to come into compliance. As we get calls or we're canvassing these areas, we strategically canvass the areas that are of the biggest concern, and we do actively put code enforcement in those areas on a regular routine basis. So we canvass the entire area, and we do focus on the areas that were most impacted throughout the time. So it's a simple call for me to Mr. Davis and ask him to make sure that we pay attention to those areas. If we start to see that it's a little out of what we're normally seeing, then we do ask them to go out and pay attention.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Okay, any other questions? Thank you guys so much for your presentation. We appreciate it.
Thank you.